Let us pray. Good and gracious God, in a rapidly changing and often confused and hurting world, we Rotarians are part of a worldwide web of service above self, committed to fostering world peace and alleviating human suffering. And so, God, may your gifts of grace and goodness to us flow through us to uplift our community, and in partnership with our Rotary sisters and brothers throughout the world, may the global community continue to be uplifted. Accept now, we pray, our praise and thanksgiving for life-giving food and fellowship. This is our prayer in your most holy name. Amen.
Thank you, David. You may take your seats. We've got a great meeting today and a lot of visitors in the room. I'm going to invite Nicholas Beasley up to introduce our visiting Rotarians and guests.
We don't have any visiting Rotarians from other clubs today, but I have a guest with you. If you'll please stand up where you are and introduce your guest. We'll bring the microphone to you.
Thank you. I have my boss and mentor, Mike Crowder, with me, who's also a former member, so please encourage him to come back and join me.
Jim Smithwick here. Most happy to have my son-in-law, Jeff Church, captain in the Coast Guard, and his son, Stephen, with me.
I'm Wade Carlisle, and I have with me my guest, my dad, Tall Carlisle.
I'm John Denise. I'm actually filling in for Little John Hanks, who I'm assuming is paying for all these lunches. I'm not, or I will. I'll be happy to because it's a great cause. I want to introduce the other Little John Hanks. This is the son of Elder John Hanks, and he's very involved in an organization called Camp Cole that's being built, and I think you guys are doing a small presentation, right? Okay. So we have Peter Fawcett, Deems Fawcett, they're a couple, their daughters, Kelsey and Margaret Deans. Kelsey Cole, I'm sorry. Kelsey Sawyer.
Thank you and welcome to all our guests.
Yes, Wayne.
We have the honor of having Bill Clowney with us here. Bill is past president of this club. Bill is past president of this club as well as past district governor. And he was secretary of his club for 20 years, 20 plus years. So he lives in Charleston now. And
Wayne, you just stole my thunder. Bill, it's always an honor to have you here today and have you here at the club. And please come back again. I hope everything is going well in Charleston. Bob Borum is going to offer health and happiness for us.
While we're on the subject of John Hanks, today is John's 76th birthday. There's Frank Brown back over there. Wave your hand, Frank Brown. Today is his 79th birthday. There you go. Do I hear 100? Where's Doug Cochran? There's Doug. His son, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Cochran, has assumed command of the 58th Fighting Squadron at Eglin Air Force Base, a squadron that Doug was the head of 22 years ago. Father-son thing. Congratulations. Well, yesterday was what? Give me a hand. Yeah. My own father was very much in mind yesterday, and I thought about the lessons he taught me by word and example. How about you? I hope you had a good Father's Day. But Father's Day ain't like Mother's Day. The florists much prefer Mother's Day to Father's Day. Florists say that, there are three events, three main things that give them the most business. One of them's Mother's Day, the other is Valentine's Day, and the other is I'm sorry. I wonder how many of you fathers got a bouquet of flowers yesterday, a box of chocolates, a breakfast in bed. And when you compare Father's Day to Mother's Day, the clear winner is Mother's Day. And what's all that starts, it really starts, this kind of inequity really starts when we were very young. And here's what I mean. When you were little, did you ever hear this poem? What are little girls made of? Sugar and spice and everything nice. And what are little boys made of? Snakes and snails and puppy dog tails. Now tell me, who comes out the winner on that one? And then as we get older, there's a song. You fill in the words for me. Blank are a girl's best friend. How about this one? A man's best friend is his... Now tell me, who comes out the winner on that? And even men don't come out the winner on any of this stuff, even in the language that we speak. Listen to the negative implications of man. Manslaughter. Manhandle. Manipulate. Manure. Well, so much for that, really. But Father's Day is still a good day, and I think we'll all agree about that. We've had a lot of rain recently. We've had a lot here, in a lot of other places. I don't know about your house, but at mine, over a period of a few days, the rain gauge was a little over 11 inches. And there was a lot more rain in other places. And there was so much rain that in some towns and some communities, they found themselves completely underwater. You've seen the news. And in one small town in Texas, they went to bed one Saturday night and the rain started. Everything was okay when they went to bed. The rains were just beginning. And it rained all night long. Downpour, hardest rain I'd ever seen. And all day Sunday it rained. It was a downpour, harder than anybody could ever remember seeing. And by Monday morning, the town was flooded. Water was halfway up to the roof on a lot of houses. People were climbing out of attic windows, sitting on the rooftops to escape the rising water, just sitting on the rooftops. By then the rain had kind of stopped, but they were watching the water as the water rises, and they were just watching. In one neighborhood, there were two houses side by side, and there was a woman sitting on each roof, and they were talking back and forth to each other. And in front of one house, the lady looked, and there was a hat floating across. And it floated slowly across in front of the house, and both women watched that 10-gallon hat, and then stopped. And then it went back the other way across to the other side of the house, and it stopped. And it went across again, back across in front of the house, and it stopped. And the lady in the house next door hollered over, said, "Maud, did you see that? Did you see that hat just go across and stop, go back across and stop, go back across and stop?" Said, "Strangest thing I've ever seen. What's going on, Maud? What do you think's going on?" And Maud called back, said, "Don't worry." Said, "Don't worry, it's just my husband, Henry. Stubbornest man I've ever seen in my life. Saturday night we went to bed, and he said, 'Maud, I'm going to mow the lawn come Monday, come hell or high water.'" Some years back, I was watching America's Funniest Home Videos, and they aren't just American stuff, they come from all over. And this one obviously was from an Asian country. And the video kind of went like this, if you get the picture. There was a small boy and a small girl, and they were walking down a sidewalk. It had evidently been raining because the street was full of water, it was gushing everywhere. And they were walking along the sidewalk, and they were standing at a gap in the sidewalk. Wasn't a big gap, but there was water rushing through that gap in the sidewalk. And to get to the other side of the sidewalk and to go where they wanted to go, they had to cross that gap. And it was a little too wide for one step to get across, and they had to jump. And the boy, who was obviously older and he was bigger, stood on one side and he jumped across. And in the video, he's standing there coaxing this little girl to come across. And she was afraid, and she still would not risk jumping across because it was a frightening thing to her. And then we watched in that video as the little boy got on his knees and stretched out his small body across the gap with the rushing water flowing beneath him. And that tiny little girl walked across his body safely to the other side. And I thought about that song, like a bridge over troubled waters, I will lay me down. Now, what I want to say is, it seems to me that each one of us has the opportunity and the ability to be the bridge over somebody's troubled waters. A helping hand, a kind word, encouragement, sympathy, compassion, and maybe that opportunity will come to you today. Don't blow it.
Thank you, Bob. As always, appreciate all the time and energy you put in preparing for your health and happiness. And you've done a great job this year as our committee chair in coordinating that for the whole year, so thank you very much. We've got a very special presentation today. You heard John Denise allude to it in the introductions a second ago. And I'm going to turn it over to John Hinks Jr. and the team here from Camp Cole to share with you about an exciting project that's going on, I guess out on the Sumter Highway, or what people from Sumter call the Columbia Highway. I guess so John, come on up. I can hand you the microphone.
So I'd like to start off by thanking you guys for the time that we have to share our project with you. My name is John Hinks Jr. I am a board member for an organization called Camp Cole. And today I'd like to introduce Margaret Deans Fawcett and Kelsey Carter as co-founders of Camp Cole. And I'm going to play a short video to start it off and turn it over to them.
Cole Sawyer was always a full-throttle kind of kid. No one played harder or laughed louder. No one's joy was more contagious. Cole loved life, which is why he loved camp. He didn't let anything limit the fun he could have there, not even cancer. Today, there are thousands of children like Cole, full-throttle kids who love life, but miss out on a camp experience because of their medically fragile conditions. It's in his memory that we're poised to build South Carolina's first sleepaway camp, specifically designed and appointed for children facing acute health challenges. Complete with a state-of-the-art medical clinic, dedicated pharmacy, and comprehensive accessibility, Camp Cole will be located just 15 miles from Prisma Health Children's Hospital in the Midlands. That's a real difference maker for kids with an illness or a disability, not to mention parents who face the agonizing choice between a child's joy and their well-being. Every child deserves to see what summer camp can be, to hear ghost stories around fire, whisper jokes after lights out, to know the special friendships that can flourish among different people who share so much. Become a founding donor to Camp Cole, and you'll help make this rite of passage a reality for deserving children across the state. Help us build a place for them to feel normal. Help us be a place for them to shine.
So I'm glad I'm turning it over because that video always makes me, whatever. So, Kelsey and Margaret Deans.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much for allowing Camp Cole to come and spread our mission with you all today. My name is Kelsey Sawyer Carter, and I was Cole's older sister. So when I was 13 years old, Cole was 11, and he was diagnosed with rhabdomyosarcoma, a very rare form of cancer. Through that experience, we were able to share in something that we loved, which was going to camp. So Cole and I attended a camp together for children who have cancer and their siblings. And what we found was a community. What we found was home. That walking in the shoes among other people meant the world to us and really provided a love. The issue was that across our state, we have 27 camp and retreat centers. Those camp and retreat centers are built for able-bodied, healthy children. And that's where Camp Cole is going to be different. We'll have a state-of-the-art medical facility. We'll have an accessible campus. That's a really big difference maker for children with cerebral palsy, autism, cancer. We also will be open for teens and adults with disabilities. We're going to bring something brand new to South Carolina. Margaret Dean's going to tell you a little bit more about where we are in that process.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Margaret Deans Grant, and like Kelsey said, we're so glad to be here. We started Camp Cole about a year ago. May 2018 is when we really kicked off our capital campaign, and like Kelsey said, we're building a camp and retreat center for children, teens, and adults with disabilities and illnesses. And I'll tell a quick little story that kind of inspired our whole journey, but we volunteer at the same camp that Kelsey went to, and last year we were getting off the bus and one of our kids had just lost his leg to osteosarcoma, bone cancer, and we were trying to teach him independence with his new leg and realized that his life wasn't over because of this life-changing event, that he was still going to be able to have a healthy, great life even with one prosthetic leg. And he was a standout football star at Spring Valley and had dreams of going to the NFL, but unfortunately when his cancer came, that was stripped from him. But he got off the bus, he had his new leg on, trying to teach him how to use the leg, and the camp we attend is dirt pathways and it's not accessible. So as soon as he got off the bus, he wasn't able to use his leg anymore because he wasn't steady enough on his leg. So he had to be put in a wheelchair and being wheeled around all week by counselors like me and Kelsey, which is not that fun for a 19-year-old boy. And as we're trying to teach these kids independence, we had to take it away from him and he had to be dependent all week. And so that's a little glimpse of why we are building Camp Cole. We truly believe that all children, teens, and adults deserve a place that is made for them when they're going through something. So Camp Cole's entire campus will be completely accessible, and accessibility is a big topic right now, but people don't always include inclusivity in accessibility. And so Camp Cole will it'll be completely ADA compliant with all the doorways, walkways, every program we have will be accessible for anyone to be able to use. So our ropes course, our pond, our equestrian therapy program, everything will be built so everyone will have the opportunity. Nobody will have to sit out of an activity because they can't participate. So since May, we've raised $5.2 million in our capital campaign of a $10 million project. And our goal is to break ground this fall when we reach $6 million. And so we are well on our way, and we are really excited about bringing this kind of facility to South Carolina. It's really above and beyond what a lot of states in our country have, and we are just really thrilled to be in the forefront of accessibility and allowing children and teens and adults who are going through something to be able to come together to experience the joys of camp, whether it's a day camp, a weekend, or a whole week-long program. We will be a user facility, so how we will work is groups that already exist in our community, whether it be for cancer, sickle cell, Down syndrome, the Air National Guard, any of those facilities. Many of them already have camping programs, but they're either day camps or they have to leave the state or go to the coast for their programming, they'll be able to use our facility. So it'll be able to be used for day camps, weekend retreats, or week-long retreats. And during the summer months, we'll jam pack it full of those children and teens disability groups, and then on the weekends in the fall, spring and winter, we'll be able to have those same groups for therapy weekends or other organizations and businesses out for retreats. So we're really looking forward to just bringing this to Columbia, and we thank y'all for the time to listen and hear about what we're going to be doing.
So the first question is, how can people help?
So like I said, we are in a capital campaign, so we are about $800,000 away from breaking ground. So we are businesses, individuals, foundations, corporations. We are meeting with them all the time to tell them about Camp Cole. So if someone you know your business is interested, please let Kelsey or I know, or John, and he can get us together. And we would love to tell you more about it and how you can get involved.
So the camp that they were talking about, just to give you an example, there's no medical special needs camps in the state of South Carolina. In addition to the medical aspect of it, it's going to be big and centrally located. The camp we're all talking about that a lot of folks here have been involved with for a long time, including the Hanks family, is Camp Chemo, which is out of Palmetto Health. But 3 or 4 years ago, we had to move Camp Chemo to the upstate to a larger facility because there's about 150 counselors and campers every year for Camp Chemo, and we just couldn't house it at the facility that's in the Midlands anymore. So now we have to go all the way to the upstate. We're really far from the hospital in case somebody has a serious incident. So Camp Cole will be available for Camp Chemo and every other medical special needs in addition to the other things. But the key is it's in the middle of the state. It's easy to get to, and it's close to major hospitals that can handle kids with pediatric issues, and the other places just don't have that. So it's a really major need that's going to serve the entire state and a lot of different populations, and I can't think of a better cause that could use your support. Elliot.
I think the venue is actually pretty exciting. Tell us about the location.
Yeah, so the location where we have been kindly gifted land is the old Coffin Farms, if you're familiar with the Sumter Highway. It's on 378. If you've gotten to Mr. Bunky's, you've gone a little bit too far, but
In many ways.
right. And so a generous family purchased the land for us and have gifted us 40 of the acres where we will be building Camp Cole in its entirety. So it is, like John said, 15 miles from the hospital, and with medically and special needs camps, there are likely medical emergencies that do happen. And so being only 15 miles from the hospital is a huge thing for us, because an ambulance can get there quickly and the kid can get the adult can get the care that they need. Many times that has been an issue at the camp where we've worked at. A lot of the camps we've been talking to, they've expressed the same need. So that really will allow for the organization, the children, and the parents of those children to feel comfortable knowing that if something does arise, they are really close to the hospital. Yes, sir.
I might not have heard correctly. Early on, did you say it includes a ropes course?
We are hoping that we will have a ropes course that will be completely accessible. So if you are in a wheelchair, you'll be able to be harnessed in and to complete the entire thing. So that is something that we will include. Any other questions?
Kelsey, Margaret, Deans, thank you so much for coming today and for sharing that. It's a very exciting thing going on right here in Richland County. And I've just got a couple of announcements, and then we'll move into our program. Blake Buchanan, where are you, Blake? Blake is hosting a Bocce Bash post-mortem committee meeting here immediately after today's meeting. So see Blake, and let's talk about all the good things that happened there. The club, as you know, is transitioning to Capital Consultants to do our administrative services. And with that, we're getting a new P.O. box and a new phone number. Please read the next newsletter and pay attention to the slideshow. We're going to just get that out there, so you know where you send your checks and membership dues and things like that will be changing going forward. So fortunately, Debbie and the Boy Scouts, are going to work with us through the transition, so it'll be okay if it goes to the wrong place once or twice, but eventually we do need to transition our mailing address and phone number. And with that, we've got a very distinguished speaker today and a very distinguished introducer of our speaker. Mayor Steve Benjamin is here. He's a member of this club. He's an honorary member of this club now, and before was an active member of this club. Always a privilege to have you here, Mayor Benjamin, and we look forward to hearing from you.
No, thank you, Stephen. It's always awesome. I had a chance to sit with Kelsey and Margaret Deans, hear more about Camp Cole, and John, thank you all for your leadership and what you're making happen. To have something of such significance and high quality, national, international high quality, that you can tell people how to get to by going by Mr. Monkey's store. It's just amazing. It's something so uniquely South Carolina and the Midlands that you gotta love it. You gotta love it, but it's gonna be amazing. So excited for Camp Cole and your vision, and brother's vision coming to reality. So I'm so excited. Many of you saw, I was actually sitting down where Lee's sitting right now earlier, trying not to sit up here because I have to go give a presentation in Charleston a little bit later, and I ask all of you to keep the families of the Emmanuel 9 in prayer as we commemorate this auspicious anniversary. I kept sitting down there, and Louisa kept telling me that I had a seat up here. The first time I just thought she was making sure I knew it. The second time I figured she really wanted me to move. The third time I figured I wasn't being volunteered, I was being voluntold to get my butt up here. So I got up and sat next to my friend Hubbard. I was humbled when I got the phone call to take on the task of introducing William today. I've known William literally the entirety of my adult life. Since I matriculated to the University of South Carolina, matriculated there as a 17-year-old student, interested in trying to do my best to change the world, as most 17-year-olds want to change the world, have no clue as to what they want to do, how they're going to do it, and don't have the value of experience to do so. But I was blessed as William was a young trustee at the university, and I was a young student as I got involved in student activities and worked my way up to being student body president and then student member of the board of trustees. I've had a chance to see someone who I believe lived the university's creed to be a faithful index to the ambitions and fortunes of South Carolina. So often we realize that the past has a constituency, but the present and the future really doesn't always have a voice. And to always have that individual in the room who respected where we've come from, who respected the fact that we do indeed live in the greatest democratic nation in the history of the world, built by so many men and women in this room, but that we've got to continue to aspire to do more and be even stronger and be even better and to protect this world for our children yet born. I saw that in him as a trustee helping lead the university and always admired him. He has gone on, and it's often many of you have laughed in the past too. Sometimes we're looking for an expert on something. We think you got to be at least 100 miles outside of the town to be an expert. We have a world-renowned expert on the rule of law. Wim has been admitted to practice, and of course, of state courts and every federal court, including the United States Supreme Court. He has served as a leader in the State Bar and the American Bar Association's president of the American Bar Endowment, and as the president of the American Bar Association, as the voice of all lawyers in this great country, and travel the world sharing the values of the rule of law. And it's my humbling honor just to have a chance to present him here into this fantastic Rotary Club. He's been published, he's a global speaker, and he's been profiled in more periodicals than I care to mention to you here today. But I give you our friend and incredible leader, Will Hubbard.
Mayor, thank you very much. I knew when I first met the mayor that he was going to be at least the mayor, if not later governor or president. He had the right stuff. You could see it when he was 17 or 18 years old. And I think you see now what a great leader he's been for our community, and we appreciate it. He did say he's going to leave soon. I said, please tell him you have to leave to give a speech so they won't think you're just walking out. You know? Louisa contacted me about 3 months ago, and I think she read a magazine article that talked about some of the opportunities I had to be in the same room with Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and she thought that you might be interested in that and some related activities during my year as president of the American Bar Association. So I'll talk about some of that. I had the great good fortune of having my term as president. It wasn't planned at all. It's one of those serendipitous things that just you luck into. And it was the time of the celebration of the 800th anniversary of Magna Carta. And so there were hundreds of celebrations both in the U.S. and in the United Kingdom, and I had the great privilege of leading 1,000 lawyers. Y'all probably thought that was a good thing for 1,000 lawyers to leave and go across the pond to London for a week. But we had a good time, and it all culminated at Runnymede by the Thames, where we celebrated the 800th anniversary of the sealing of Magna Carta by King John at the insistence of the barons, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But it was a day of great celebration. And but first, a little history about Magna Carta, especially for those who aren't familiar with the Great Charter. It's the foundation for the rule of law and a symbol of freedom and justice in the United States and literally around the world. Today, the principles of the rule of law embodied in Magna Carta remain as important as they ever were. And there were 3,500 words written in medieval Latin that were scrawled 560 years before there was even a United States of America. But they've carried through the centuries to our country and around the world. The real enduring value, or one of the enduring values and legacies of Magna Carta, is the impact that it's had on the way that people think about their relationship with between the government and the governed, between the government and individuals. The Charter is viewed as the genesis of the idea that freedom is secured under the rule of law and not by rulers. And it's not by the sword. And it also stands for the proposition that no person, no king, no sovereign, no president is above the law. And it gave birth to the concept also that individuals have rights against the government. So what specifically has it meant to American law? It's the basis of many of our fundamental concepts. The idea of a written constitution itself comes from the idea that Magna Carta was actually written in Latin. Before then, there were no written charters. It was the inspiration. It was the inspiration when the colonists came over to establish our nation. It was the inspiration for the colonial charters, also the original state constitutions, including South Carolina's constitution, and all of that funneled up to the ideas that were embodied in the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. The United States Supreme Court continues to cite Magna Carta principles. They've cited it at least 175 times, and as recently as in the last year. It really, what it does is it traces our belief in the principles that it establishes the principles of due process of law, notice and an opportunity to be heard, trial by jury of one's peers, the importance of a speedy and unbiased trial, and protection against excessive bails and fines, and cruel and unjust punishment. And interestingly, it also established that kernel that later grew, that courts are to be independent from the executive, the independence of the judiciary. Because until Magna Carta, the courts followed the king. They were the king's court. And so they ruled, the judges would rule however the king wanted them to rule. But Magna Carta said that the courts would be in a set place, that they would not follow the king. And that led to the whole idea that we have judicial independence, we have a co-equal branch of government being our judiciary. So how did this charter come about? Well, it was not easy. There was a terrific fight between the barons and King John, starting in 1204. King John he had his lands in Normandy taken from him, and he wanted to launch a campaign to go back and take those lands, and so he arbitrarily raised taxes and levies on the barons. And so taxes again, front and center. The barons didn't like being taxed arbitrarily, and so they complained. They complained bitterly, and then, among other things, because King John was really one of the worst kings in the history of England. And the kings and the barons confronted him first overtly at a place called Temple Church in London. It's still there today. You can tour it. And it stands there today, and the barons put forth a set of written, practical demands and elevated them to a set of principles which literally became the charter. And so the king countered with insistence that the barons pledge fealty to him and to no other. And they declined to do that, and then they took over the city of London, and the confrontation seemed to be escalating. And so they next met at Runnymede, which is very near Windsor Castle outside of London, and what is very near to what is now Heathrow Airport. So if you go to Runnymede, you can see the planes coming over about every 5 seconds, it seems like. The barons came in arms, but this was a soggy ground which was not suitable for cavalry. And so the negotiations didn't lead to war. They led to the sealing of Magna Carta. Agreement was reached, and the king sealed Magna Carta. There are 4 surviving copies of that original Magna Carta now. I think there were originally 11 parchments of it, and there are 4 remaining. So it is a document that we can trace our U.S. Constitution directly back to those precepts in Magna Carta. And so it is something, it's a document that is worthy of great celebration. So as I mentioned, I had the privilege during that year of 2015 to lead the delegations over to London and Runnymede for the celebrations. But the planning for the grand event, which was on the 800th anniversary at Runnymede, began literally years before. And part of that planning resulted in my being invited to Buckingham Palace to meet with a Captain Watson, who was Princess Anne's chief of staff. He was retired from the Royal Navy. So I got my first education in how precise everything is run by the royal family. I was told to come in, and went in, I waited, and I met with him. He couldn't have been nicer, but it was very clear that they were in control. And certain things like I was to have my remarks that I would give on the day of the celebration to them about 3 months in advance, so that they could make sure that I wouldn't say anything that would contradict what Princess Anne would say, who was also going to be a speaker on that event. And interestingly, I was to meet her at an exact spot at Runnymede on that day. Literally X marks the spot at at about 10:50. And then by 11:23, I was to have her back at a certain spot so she could get in a Bentley and go to the investiture of 2 new members into the Order of the Garter. And she had to change into a long dress and tiara to do that. So it was very important that I have her back. So all that was made very clear. And so it was made for an interesting day, trying to make sure that everything was run to precision. And then that night, the great good fortune I had was I went back to the hotel, and there was an invitation waiting for me to come to a reception at Buckingham Palace. And so glad I had a nice suit that day, and I went to Buckingham Palace and went through a receiving line and had the opportunity to speak at that time with Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. She couldn't have been nicer. She looks as healthy and fit as a 50-year-old. She really is remarkable. Then I went into another room. I was admiring the artwork. I was in sort of a cluster with a group of people, and a tall fellow came up and said, "Where's the American?" And I tentatively raised my hand. It was Prince Philip. And Prince Philip said, "Yes, we protected you in the French and Indian War, and we tried to levy a tax on you for your own protection, and you left us." I kept waiting for him to burst out in laughter, but he never did. I I said something like, well, I think it worked out pretty well for all of us. Anyway, I think if you've seen The Crown or read anything about Prince Philip, I think you understand what a charming individual he is, and how he has a real sense of humor. But then on that event itself, on the grand celebration, it was really a cloudy and cool day. We had to get up very early because of these other events later in the day. But then when the royal family arrived, and literally when Queen Elizabeth, the doors of her car were opened by the staff, the clouds parted and the sun came out, I swear. And we had a great celebration. The speakers that day were the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Lord Chancellor, Prime Minister Cameron spoke, and he was nice enough to take a small group of us behind the stage before the event started. He couldn't have been more friendly or accommodating. The Master of the Rolls, the London Symphony, played original music, and it was at that time that I had occasion to be reintroduced to Her Majesty, and she was coming through a line after the first part of the ceremony, and she came through, and I said, I'm William Hubbard from South Carolina, American Bar Association president. She said, of course, we met back in February at the Palace when you were there for the Rule of Law reception. But, you know, I was stunned by that. Not that I'm memorable, because I know I'm not. It's just the fact that I know she was briefed, and I know they told her who she would be seeing, but the fact that she would make that kind of effort instead of just nodding and shaking hands and moving down the line, I think says a lot about the kind of person that she is. So the second part of the ceremony was when as I said, was to meet Princess Anne at a certain spot, and I was trying to race over to see her. Of course, I could see her coming across this this meadow, and I just had to be there in time. It's a good thing I ran track in high school this day. I hightailed it to the spot, and then at that point, she literally took control. She said, we're going to go over here, we're going to speak to the ambassador from India, and then we're going to head down. So we walked together, and you'll see a snippet of it on a video, which I'll show you shortly, through the Royal Guard with their red jackets and their bearskin hats that are about 3 feet tall off their heads. And so we went through, and then we had several speakers at part 2 of the celebration. The United States government was represented by then Attorney General Loretta Lynch. I spoke briefly, and Princess Anne spoke, and then we rededicated the only monument to Magna Carta in the United Kingdom, which was paid for by volunteer donations from American lawyers in 1957. So after the rededication, 11:23, have her at a spot. There weren't supposed to be that many people inside this protected area, but security had broken down, like 1,000 people had crowded around Princess Anne, and so I was sweating profusely and trying to get her through the crowd, and people wanted selfies, and they wanted autographs and all of that stuff. But somehow at 11:26, I got her to the spot. She jumped in a Bentley, and I assume somehow on the way over to Windsor Castle, she was able to change into the right clothes. But it was certainly a great day for me, and certainly exciting, and hope it wasn't too boring for you to listen about it. But fast forward now, listen to that story. Let's fast forward now. I know what time it is. Y'all are not real subtle about it. I got it. So I'm going to kind of race through some of this stuff. That's right. My wife usually is in the audience going. So, in 2019, I'm part of an institution called the World Justice Project, and we do an assessment of the strength or weakness of the rule of law in over 130 countries, and now it's being relied on by the World Bank and the United Nations and others. What we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years is rising authoritarianism around the world. The dictators and the heavy-handed authoritarian figures are on the rise. And I had seen some evidence of that in some of my other travels as APA president. One of them I want to talk to you specifically about was an incident in China in which I was to give a speech after former President Jimmy Carter. We were in the so-called green room, and there were stacks of his books. A photographer was there. He was to be there to autograph books, have pictures taken, and he was to speak, and I was to follow him. He didn't show up, so I asked the sponsors of the program, I said, well, where's President Carter? I'm supposed to speak after him. They said, He's not allowed to speak. Yesterday he spoke about human rights, that his permission to speak now has been withdrawn. And then they handed me a letter that said, you shall not say anything critical of the government. So I felt like I was on the horns of a dilemma. I'm in a foreign country. Here's a group of people that say, you know, they've banned a former president of my country from speaking. What am I to do? So fortunately that morning over breakfast, I read that the Communist Party was having as its theme a month later, the rule of law. So I threw my speech in the trash and I made a quick decision just to stand up, and I started giving remarks about what the rule of law really means, not necessarily the Communist Party version of the rule of law. And it's about governments being accountable to the people, laws being just and clear, the process of enactment and enforcement of laws is open, fair, and efficient, and justice is delivered by independent and impartial judges, and not judges who do just I didn't say what the Communist Party tells them to do, but that was implicit in what I was saying. As I was going through this extemporaneous speech about what the rule of law really means, I could see, as the translation was being made, I could see people start to filter out of the room. And, you know, I frankly had a little scared. I didn't know what the next thing was going to be. I didn't know if I'd be arrested or whatever. But I will say this, it came out all right, but I've never felt better to hit 10,000 feet in an airplane than when I took off from Beijing that day. And I think I ordered a double scotch just for good measure. It was really a sign, I think, of what was to come, because a year later the Communist Party insisted that this office that the American Bar Association had, which was supported by the State Department, frankly the funds come from the State Department that come to the American Bar Association to do rule of law work in challenged countries, and the Chinese government closed that office about a year later. And the same thing happened in Russia. We had an office there doing rule of law work, and once the head of that office was at the airport in Moscow, he was trying to leave the country just for a visit, and they seized his visa and said, you can never come back again, and that office has since been closed as well. Saudi Arabia was another interesting trip, had great relationships with the Minister of Justice there. We were working on things like allowing women to represent men and allowing there to be more women lawyers in Saudi Arabia. There was going to be exchange of judges back and forth between the two countries, and really made a lot of progress there. There was a very progressive Minister of Justice, and then after meetings I had with him in Riyadh, about 2 weeks later the king died, and this whole new regime came in and they started imprisoning people, and so nothing's really happened with that. So Lebanon, another interesting trip, and I'll make it very short. Think about our immigration problems in our country, the surge of people coming across the border. Lebanon has 4 million people and 1 million Syrian refugees in a country of 4 million people. So it's really taxing what Lebanon, and it really exacerbates the problems they have. But, you know, it's really important that we think about and focus on the fact that we really have to work hard to preserve what we have in our country and make sure people understand the values of our country, particularly how we need to really refocus on civics education. Let me just share a couple of quick facts with you. There's really a low level of understanding, particularly about our judicial system. In fact, but if you go to the preamble of the Constitution, it says, we the people, in order to establish a more perfect union, establish justice. It's the first priority of our nation, to establish justice. But we really have a low level of understanding. Let me give you some examples. According to recent data gathered by the Federal Judicial Center, fewer than 1/3 of Americans know that John Roberts is the Chief Justice. Okay. Only fewer than 1/3 know he's the Chief Justice. Only 43% can name a single justice, but 69% can name a judge on American Idol. We think that's funny, and it is funny, but it's also very, very sad and tragic, and we have to do something about it. Only 26% of adult Americans can name all 3 branches of government. and 37% cannot name any First Amendment right. So there's a lot of work to do, and so that's one reason I was looking at the website for Rotary International last night and looking at what you do to support education, and we were talking a little bit about the book program. All of these things you do to support education and also to promote peace around the world are essential. These times are really challenging. I was briefed one time by a senior official, a non-political appointee, a lifer at the State Department. He said, you know, right now our battles are in the Middle East, but our children and our children's children will be fighting the Chinese. And so you see signs of that rising totalitarianism. You've seen what they're trying to do to Hong Kong now through the Communist Party. They really tightened down all around the world. So we need to do all we can to promote peace. So I commend what Rotary does, this club, and Rotary International generally. And on a lighter note, I think Cynthia has some videos that we can show that give you a sense of what it was like at Runnymede on June 15, 2015, and then an interview that I participated in at the BBC. So, Cynthia, thank you.
With royal pomp and circumstance, Britain's leaders gathered on the banks of the River Thames at Runnymede to mark the anniversary of one of the world's most significant historical documents. It was here 800 years ago that King John signed the Magna Carta, putting limits on the power of the crown and paving the way for modern freedoms and human rights. British Prime Minister David Cameron.
Its remaining copies may be faded, but its principles shine as brightly as ever.
4 original copies of the document still exist, some stored at the British Library in London.
Delegation.
For American dignitaries present at the ceremony, the Magna Carta is especially significant. It became the basis for the U.S. Bill of Rights, the U.S. Declaration of Independence, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. American Bar Association President William Hubbard says, while some things have changed, the overarching message remains the same.
Magna Carta has advanced important human rights through centuries and throughout democracies all around the world.
U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch described its impact as everlasting.
While the hands that wrote the Magna Carta have long been stilled, the principles they carved out of the struggles of their day, of the struggles of the human condition, live on.
And 800 years later, whether King John intended it or not, those principles are still viewed as a cause for celebration.
Well, as you heard there in Nick Mitchell's report, guests from around the world travelled to commemorate the anniversary of Runnymede today, including a delegation of American lawyers who view the Magna Carta as a foundation of the US Constitution. William Hubbard, president of the American Bar Association, spoke about the Charter's significance.
In this field were born precepts that made possible the United States Constitution. But while some things have changed, the overarching message remains constant. Magna Carta has advanced important human rights through centuries and throughout democracies all around the world.
I'm pleased to say William has joined us now. Welcome, thanks for coming in. You gave the speech and you really sort of demonstrated that link that the US feels to the Magna Carta. Your own institution.
It's a powerful link. The American Bar Association has always been interested in reaffirming the importance of Magna Carta. It was in 1957 that 9,000 lawyers in the U.S. gave money to erect a monument at Runnymede to memorialize Magna Carta. And we've raised some additional funds and we've come back and we've refurbished it. But the most important thing is that we're here to make the public aware of the importance of Magna Carta, certainly in the U.S. and around the world. It is the foundation of America's constitutional democracy.
Give us a sense of just what the U.S. Constitution means to an American, because we don't always understand that.
Well, it's the most revered, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the Bill of the subsequent Bill of Rights are the most iconic documents in American history, but you trace the words in those documents directly back to Magna Carta. concepts of due process of law, trial by jury. When the colonists arrived from England, they brought with them the concepts of freedom and rights as Englishmen, and they made manifest those principles in the state constitutions, and that later became our U.S. Constitution.
So we gave you the Magna Carta, and you decided you didn't want to have anything more to do with us.
We like those principles. We thought those principles were transcendent.
Yeah. And does it seem to you odd that the UK doesn't really have a constitution? Is that something that seems unfathomable?
It is a little curious to an American because we parse those words. Anytime we have a case or a law or a public discussion, we're always talking about the Constitution of the United States and what it means.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? I mean, it's something that every school kid knows off by heart, all the links. So when you look back at the Magna Carta, what do you think are sort of, if you could single out the most fundamental clause?
The most fundamental principle from Magna Carta is that no one is above the law.
No.
Thomas Paine said right before the Revolution, in America, law is king. And so was the idea that the people had some control over their destiny, and they were not subject to the unfettered discretion of the sovereign.
And does it worry you when you think of, the way, I'm going back to things like habeas corpus and holding on to people without trial. If you compare Guantanamo, what's happened under sort of administrations with what the message of the Magna Carta says then, do you have problems reconciling that?
Well, there are always challenges. There are always disputes about what the Constitution means, what those rights and what due process of law means, what being detained means without access to habeas corpus. And it's the application to the specific facts that lawyers argue about and judges have to decide where those boundaries are.
It's great having you here. Thank you very much for coming when you come.
Thank you all very much.
William, thank you so much for being here today. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much. I understand you got to go to Charleston. Appreciate you coming today as well. I'd like to give you, on behalf of the club, a coin. It's got the insignia of Paul Harris on one side, and the other side is the four-way test, which really emulates the precepts of the Magna Carta that you fight to protect. Thank you so much. Next week is Transition Week, where we will be welcoming President-elect Louisa as the president of the club. We're going to have some fun. We're going to do some good things. So please come. Please bring a guest. It's going to be a lot of fun. And with that, we'll stand and close in song.